About 3 years ago, my stepsister Daphne got pregnant. She and her husband Jim were thrilled, but found out at the 20-week scan that the baby had a congenital condition and would be born severely disabled. Apologies if these are insensitive terms. I'm not sure how people prefer to say it. Daphne decided to keep going with the pregnancy despite Jim's protests, and they split up, but got back together by the time their son Liam was born. He is now 2 years old. Over the last 2 years, Daphne's and Jim's mental health has declined significantly. Daphne used to be a positive and pleasant person, but now it's impossible to have a conversation with her. She is malicious, envious, and flies off the handle at any perceived slight. When I was having my child, I didn't speak to her for most of the pregnancy because of how bitter and narcissistic she was. We don't live close to Daphne, so rarely see her in person, but I heard she was getting worse from our parents. In early November, Daphne had a mental breakdown. She trashed Liam's room completely and vandalized Jim's car in a fit of rage. This was enough to finally get her moved up the waiting list for mental health services, and she started therapy. She reached out to me during this time, and we had a few conversations, and I invited her and Jim to visit my husband and me for a vacation at our beach house in March. Then we saw Daphne and Jim over Christmas, and it was awful. Daphne could keep herself in check for a couple of hours, but then she would revert back to her old self. She would swear constantly, and while I know Liam can't understand her, I think swearing at kids isn't okay. Whenever I expressed concern for her, she would just snap that I need to get off my high horse about having a perfect child. Jim was snapping at her constantly. He would also constantly ask to hold or play with my child, to the point it got annoying. Overall, the whole Christmas break was just the whole family being anxious over the situation. My husband finally said a week ago that he didn't want Daphne and Jim visiting, and I agreed. I called Daphne and said that something had come up with my husband's work and we needed to cancel the trip. Daphne was furious. Apparently, her therapist had been saying how good this break would be for her. They haven't been on vacation since having Liam, and I owed her this one thing to help her. Eventually she gave up and said I was a horrible person for pulling the rug out from under her and hung up. I feel bad if I'm derailing her recovery, and even my parents think I shouldn't have cancelled, which is making me rethink things. They saw how absolutely horrible she was to me over Christmas. They saw how obsessed Jim became with my child, and they still think I should have put that aside. And they're not normally the keep the peace people, so maybe I really am in the wrong. Am I the idiot here? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. How is a change of venue going to improve your sister's mental health? She is still going to be responsible for her child, jealous of the attention her husband will give your child, and becoming unstable and defensive when challenged regarding unacceptable behavior. She obviously isn't telling her therapist everything, and the first thing they should be looking at is regular and local respite care to get a break from being parents of a special needs child. They need time to breathe. Comment 2. Not the idiot. While your sister's mental health issues are tragic, her behaviors during Christmas pretty much told you what you and your family can expect during another visit. You most certainly did not derail her recovery. She needs a lot more help than you can provide to her, including finding some specialized babysitting for her son. You don't owe it to her, nor to your parents, the stress that she will put you and your family under. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my last post about my stepsister Daphne, her husband Jim, and their son Liam. I thought things couldn't get more intense, but boy was I wrong. So, after I cancelled the beach house trip, things went from bad to worse. Daphne's therapist had been working with her on managing her anger, but the cancelled trip set her off big time. She started posting all over social media about how family should always stick together and support each other, clearly aiming it at me. It was embarrassing, but I tried to ignore it. Jim, on the other hand, reached out to me privately. He apologized for his behavior over Christmas, saying he was just desperate to feel some normalcy with a child that wasn't facing the same challenges as Liam. I felt for him. I really did, but it was still weird how he was with my kid. Now, here's where things get really crazy. Remember how Daphne and Jim had been on rocky ground since before Liam was born? Well, it turns out that during one of their rough patches, Daphne had a brief fling with an old high school boyfriend. I only found out because the guy's wife messaged me out of the blue, asking if I knew anything about it. Apparently, she found some old messages and put 2 and 2 together. I was floored. I didn't know what to do with that information. I decided not to tell Jim right away because I didn't want to be the one to drop that bomb. But it seems like the universe had other plans. The wife confronted Daphne in the middle of the grocery store, causing a huge scene. It was all over our small town's gossip mill in hours. Jim found out, and he was devastated. He called me, asking if I knew, and I had to admit that I did. He was hurt that I didn't tell him, and I felt terrible. Meanwhile, Daphne was spiraling. She was already struggling, and this was the last straw. She started lashing out at everyone, including me. She accused me of being happy to see her life falling apart, which couldn't be further from the truth. But here's the kicker. In the midst of all this chaos, Liam's condition started to improve. The doctors were amazed. They said it was rare, but not unheard of, for kids with his condition to make sudden progress. Daphne and Jim were overjoyed, of course, but it also brought a new kind of tension. They were suddenly united in something, but the betrayal and the hurt were still there, simmering under the surface. Jim started talking about forgiveness and working things out for Liam's sake. But Daphne was too caught up in her own issues to really hear him. She was convinced that everyone was against her, even when Jim was reaching out. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, my parents got involved. They've always been the type to try and fix things, but this time they went too far. They sat Daphne and Jim down for an intervention of sorts, which ended in shouting and tears. My mom called me afterward, upset, saying she just wanted to help, but felt like she'd made things worse. As for me, I've been trying to keep my distance while still being supportive. It's a tough balance. I've been talking to a therapist myself to try and figure out how to handle all this without getting too dragged into it. It's hard though, because Daphne's been calling me non-stop, sometimes just to vent, sometimes to blame me for everything. And just when I thought I'd heard it all, Daphne dropped another bombshell. She told me she's pregnant again. She doesn't know who the father is, and she's terrified. Jim doesn't know yet, and I'm dreading the fallout when he finds out. Friend asks me to take care of her overweight cat Juno while she's in Europe for a year and insists on free feeding, but I switch to controlled feeding and Juno loses weight and becomes more energetic. When she finds out, she demands I switch back to free feeding, but I refuse. My friend's cat Juno has always been massive. Well beyond the level of a usual, "Oh, that cat is kind of fat." She was an absolute tank, and she is not even a large breed, just a standard regular cat. Whenever someone would point out that she was bigger than she should be, my friend would get annoyed and insist she is just that way and is perfectly healthy. My friend started a global mobility assignment at her job that involved living in Europe for a year, and she asked me if I would take care of Juno while she was gone, which I agreed to. She walked me through all the cat care matters before she left and told me that Juno was free-fed, and I just needed to keep her feeder topped off so that she could access dry food at any time. The feeder wasn't on a timer, it was just a bottle that dispensed food with gravity whenever the tray got empty. I told her that I really wasn't comfortable letting her have constant access to food at her weight. She said, paraphrasing here, "Look, she's still my cat, and you don't get to make that call. Either tell me you're going to stick to the plan, or tell me you won't, and I'll find someone else." I agreed, but admittedly I wondered if I would be able to follow through on my word for a whole year. I lasted maybe a week. Having Juno around all day every day made it extremely clear how much she was suffering because of her weight. She struggled to even hop up on my couch. I took the feeder away and started feeding her 1 can of wet food in the morning and 1 can in the evening. I work from home, so the adjustment period of constant yowling for food was an absolute nightmare. But it worked. She is now 14 pounds after 8-ish months on the My Way or the Highway diet, and it's much more energetic and mobile. Even her breathing sounds better. My friend has started to notice the weight loss in the photos that I've been sending her, and is extremely upset that I went behind her back after I agreed to the free feeding. She demanded that I go back to the old way. I said honestly, "I'm sorry, but I really don't think I can bring myself to do that." I was like, "I know that when she is back with you, that you are going to do what you will, but while she is under my roof, I can't just let her gorge herself on food all day when it's clear that she can eat normally and lose weight. That would be neglect." My friend called around to see if any other friends or family would take her for the remaining 4-ish months, but no one wanted to. She is extremely upset with me and says that when she is back in the US, she is taking her cat back, and this friendship is over. It hurts, but I accept it. I know I went back on my word, and it must feel very bad for my friend to be across the world with this situation totally out of her hands. But I don't know if I can bring myself around to thinking that I actually did something morally wrong. I welcome any and all feedback. Lay it on me. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. If someone put their child into your care and said, feed them at least 6 Big Macs a day and they can have whatever chips, fries, cookies, ice cream and snacks that they want when they want it, would you actually do that? Then why would you do it with an animal who is supposedly loved? OP says they tapered down and the cat is healthy. OP is not the jerk, NTA, for not being complicit in animal abuse. Comment 2. Normally, I would say someone is the jerk, TA, for making a decision for someone's pet or going against their wishes, but I feel differently about this one. You would have had to neglect Kitty to keep feeding her that way, like you said. You would have been doing something wrong to her. So to me, totally not the jerk, NTA. I hope she sees how much healthier she is and rethinks how she fed her before. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support on my last post about Juno. It's been a rough week since then, and I've got quite the update for you. So after my friend demanded I switch back to free feeding Juno, things got really tense. I stood my ground, and she was fuming. She even tried to get her parents to guilt-trip me into changing my ways, but they actually sided with me. Turns out, they had always been concerned about Juno's weight, but didn't want to upset their daughter. Who knew? In the midst of all this, Juno's transformation continued. She's become this playful, curious cat who loves to chase laser pointers and actually fits in her cat bed now. It's like she's a whole new cat, and I can't help but feel proud of her. But then, the unexpected happened. My friend's assignment got cut short, and she was coming back to the States in just 2 weeks. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. I knew our confrontation was inevitable, and I dreaded the thought of losing both Juno and my friend. The day my friend returned, she came straight to my place. The tension in the air was thick as she walked in, her eyes immediately finding Juno. She was shocked. Juno looked up at her with bright, curious eyes, a stark contrast to the lethargic cat she used to be. The confrontation was intense. My friend was hurt that I'd gone against her wishes, and I understood that. But as we argued, Juno jumped onto the couch between us, a feat she couldn't have managed before. It was like she was trying to mediate. In a surprising turn, my friend broke down crying. She confessed that she'd always been afraid to address Juno's weight because it reminded her of her own struggles with body image. It was a jaw-dropping moment, and it explained so much about her defensive attitude. We spent hours talking, reminiscing about our college days when we first met. We'd been through so much together, supporting each other through breakups, finals, and family drama. It was those shared experiences that made our bond so strong. And it was heartbreaking to think it could all end over a disagreement about cat care. In a twist I didn't see coming, my friend thanked me. She admitted that seeing Juno so healthy was a wake-up call for her. She realized that she had been projecting her own issues onto Juno, and it wasn't fair to the cat. But it wasn't all happy tears and group hugs. My friend was still hurt, and she made it clear that while she was grateful for what I'd done for Juno, she felt betrayed. She decided she needed some space to sort out her feelings, and that meant taking Juno back as soon as possible. The day she came to pick up Juno was bittersweet. I watched as Juno hesitated at the door, looking back at me as if she knew this was goodbye. My friend and I shared a long, silent hug, both of us unsure of where we stood with each other. As they left, I closed the door behind them, the silence of my apartment settling around me. I missed Juno already, but I took solace in knowing she was healthier and happier because of the tough choices I'd made. Wife makes me do all the housework, and then I find out she's been seeing old friend. I, 48, male, and my wife Anne, 47, female, live by ourselves. Our kids have both moved out. I'm the breadwinner and Anne the stay-at-home mom. Now she's the housewife after our youngest moved out last year. What's changed is that she says she's owed for raising our kids and taking care of the household. She wants more personal time, less work around the house, and so I've basically taken over almost all the housework, cooking 3 meals, cleaning the house. I'm still working a full-time job, and I never slacked on chores that I did, such as the gardening, heavy lifting, etc. And I was never an absent father. I bore with it for the past year, but she's gotten more hurtful, outright berating me in front of the kids when they visit, that I'm only good for my strength and don't think about the household at all. While she is doing less of the household work, it's gotten to the point that I just want to relax in the car for a good solid minute, because I only know there's a long list of things to do. Last night, She went out with her friends, while I slept early for work. This morning, I looked for the car keys for over 30 minutes, which were not in the drawer we always put them in. I woke her up to ask where she put them, and she just grumbled at me to find them myself before going back to sleep. I ended up finding them in her handbag and got to work late. I got home today to her screaming at me for invading her privacy by going through her handbag. I tried to tell her that she told me to find them myself, but she kept cutting me off, saying I should have known better than to dig through her personal belongings, that she has rights, and I should respect them, and to wait for her to wake before getting her to find the keys herself. It was when she said she didn't care if I was late to work that I lost it. Her exact line was, "It's not like we're needing that stupid money anymore." I yelled back at her that she was entitled and selfish, and that the only reason she's able to enjoy her current time is because of my money. That she's been having it far too easy the past year. And if she wanted to see what she's owed, she can go back to either working or doing all the chores she's dumped on me. Anne was shell-shocked that I yelled back at her. The rest of the night was quiet, and she locked herself in our bedroom and hasn't come out. I've called our kids and told them what happened. My daughter agrees with me, but son says that I may have been too harsh to call her entitled, and implied that I undermined her efforts all those years as a stay-at-home mom. They're going to take turns calling Anne, but I now wonder if I may have been overboard with yelling at her about taking it too easy. Daughter has suggested couple therapy, and said that she's going to suggest it to Anne as well. I'm more than willing to do so, as today's encounter made me reflect that I'm getting extremely tired and weary of this life. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. Why is your wife owed for taking care of the house, etc., if you also worked and did chores? It sounds like she feels the division of labor was uneven. Regardless, if the distribution of work needed to be changed, that should have been a conversation, not a dumping of tasks on you. It is never acceptable to berate your partner or be hurtful. You shouldn't have lost your temper, but it was in response to the situation, which has become increasingly difficult. Your wife is not being reasonable. It sounds like you both need to discuss this, perhaps with a professional, impartial mediator. Comment 2. Not the idiot. Your wife sounds messed up. Something is very wrong. This is the time when both of you should be enjoying your life together. Something is wrong. She's either having a midlife crisis or an affair. Find out. Now for the update. Hey everyone, back with an update on the situation with my wife Anne. It's been a tense 3 days since my last post, and a lot has happened. So after the blow-up over the car keys, things went from bad to worse. Anne didn't speak to me for a whole day. I thought maybe she needed space, so I gave it to her. But then, the next day, I came home from work to find her in the living room with a man I'd never seen before. Turns out, it was an old friend from her college days, Mark. They were laughing and having a good time, which was a shock because Anne hadn't laughed like that with me in months. I tried to keep my cool, introduced myself, and Mark left shortly after. But I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. Anne was suddenly in a good mood, but only when she was texting on her phone, which she started to guard like a hawk. I remembered how she used to be glued to her phone back in the day when we were dating, always texting her friends about the latest gossip. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Mark and Anne's sudden change in behavior. I decided to confront her about it the next morning. I asked her straight up if there was something going on between her and Mark. She laughed it off, saying I was being paranoid, but I could tell she was nervous. Later that day, I got a call from my daughter, who was in tears. She had seen Anne and Mark together at a cafe, holding hands. My heart sank. I had always trusted Anne, and the thought of her being with someone else was like a punch in the gut. I remembered how we used to hold hands everywhere we went, how she said it made her feel safe and loved. And now, she was giving that same affection to someone else. I confronted Anne again when she got home. This time, she couldn't hide it. She admitted that she had been seeing Mark for a few months. She said she felt lonely, and that I wasn't giving her the attention she needed. I was floored. I had been working my tail off to provide for us, taking over all the household chores, and this was how she repaid me. The argument that followed was the worst we've ever had. Anne said she felt trapped in our marriage, that she missed the excitement of her younger days. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had always thought we were happy, that we were a team. But now, it felt like I didn't even know her. Our son called later, trying to mediate. He reminded me of the time when Anne supported me through my job loss years ago, how she had been my rock. He said maybe we both had taken each other for granted. I couldn't argue with that, but the betrayal stung too much. The house has been icy since then. Anne has been staying in the guest room, and we barely speak. My daughter has been checking in on me, suggesting couples therapy again. I'm willing to try it, but I'm not sure if I can get past this heartbreak. I've been reflecting on our marriage, on all the good times we've had. I remember how Anne used to surprise me with my favorite meals, how she'd leave little love notes in my lunchbox. It's hard to reconcile those memories with what's happening now. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.